Okay, so welcome to Tanya, and we're going to be learning chapter 5 of Tanya today. But part of our warm up, which we don't always do for Tanya, but we're going to do it tonight, is reading a Hayom Yom. And in this case, it's going to be one that's coming up, the 13th of Kislev. Today, right now, it's the 12th of Kislev. Today was the 11th. So anyway, my father, the Rebbe Rashav, once said, Hasidus transforms one's existence and reveals one's essence. The inner nature of a Jew can be neither appreciated nor fathomed, for it is part of Hashem's essence. Chelek Elokai Mimal. And when one grasps part of the essence, it's as if one has grasped it in its entirety. Just as Hashem's essence has no limits, so too this part has no limits. It's like tzitzit, which must be made of the same material as the corner of the garment to which they are attached. It is only that Hashem's essence created the soul as a created being, and Hasidus reveals its inner nature. So this is something that we've talked about before, the incredible reality of a Jewish soul, the soul of a human being, the soul of a Jew, and that it's part of Hashem. And so when you're loving one person, which is part of that great entity, being kind to one person, being connected, being compassionate, doing tzedakah or chesed to one aspect of that essence, you in a way attaching to the whole of the essence, because we are all part of a hologram, right? Each one of us are part of the whole, and the whole is all of us. So I was interested to do this as a Hayom Yom because it relates very nicely to topics that we're going to do in Tanya today. So what does chapter 5 discuss? So I'll just give you a synopsis outside of the text, and then we'll go inside the text. So basically, last week we were talking about, in chapter 4, about doing mitzvot and how, so let me just come inside here, how when we do a mitzvah using the garments of our soul, we are grabbing onto Hashem, so to speak. And we spoke about the fact that doing a mitzvah, referencing to that pasuk, that 1 hour in this world of teshuvah has more value than all of one's time in Olam Haba, all of one's time in the world to come. And how can that be? And we explained last week in chapter 4 that when a soul is disencumbered from its body and it goes up to the higher realms, it is going to be able to bask in the luminosity, the light of godliness and God and consciousness that is going to be experienced by the soul through being in a realm where there's truth and godliness is revealed. So if you spent your whole time in your lifetime in a semi-illuminated basement, and then you go somewhere and the lights are turned on, you're going to have a much greater appreciation for truth and for what happened in your life. You'll have understanding, you'll have a greater expansiveness of consciousness. But in terms of getting close to God, the Tanya explained that actually being in the world, in a body, and taking your garments of your soul, your hands, your actions, your thought, your speech, and grabbing onto a mitzvah is a much higher experience of actually connecting to God. Not understanding things from God's perspective, but actually connecting and binding yourself to Hashem. That happens much more in this world through the garments of the soul, the thought, the speech, and the action of the soul. In fact, that's way higher. So, and then we spoke about the fact that in many Jewish texts or many communities or many people, they spend a lot of time talking about Olam Haba, I'm working on my Olam Haba. This mitzvah will get me a better Olam Haba, higher, better. And there's a story told, I think it may be even the Baal Shem Tov, I'm not sure, who gave up his whole Olam Haba in order that another person could get a bracha or have some kind of schus. And then he's like, now I know all my mitzvahs are completely l'shem shemaim, because he didn't really feel that Olam Haba was really that main kavanah for him. So that quote, that 1 hour in this world of action, of active mitzvahs, can't even compare that to all the time in Olam Haba. So the concept and the construct of Ma'aser hu ha'ikar, action, is the most important thing. And if we think about it, and we spoke about it on Wednesday, the life of Yaakov and the travails of Yaakov, and the way Yaakov had to take on the hands, take on the skins of Esav, in order to be active in this world. That we speak about, our purpose in the world is to make a difference in the world through our actions, through our speech, and through our thought. So that's what we spoke about last time. And we spoke about the fact that 2 things help us bond in that way to Hashem: doing mitzvahs, and one of those mitzvahs, and in something in its category all of its own, is learning Torah. And so chapter 5 now is going to talk about learning Torah, and it's going to talk about the fact that if we say that our life, when we do mitzvahs or learn Torah, we are connecting to Hashem in an active and a physical and an actual way more than we will or could even in Olam Haba. But Tanya is going to say, but if we had to compare between doing mitzvahs or learning Torah, which is also a mitzvah, but it's a mitzvah of consciousness, actually learning Torah is superior.
Mm-hmm.
That's could come as a surprise. You could say, well, you just talked about meaningfully affecting the world. You could talk, you were talking about doing things in the world and changing reality in the world. But what the Tanya is going to say is that the mitzvah of learning Torah will enable you to grasp onto Hashem in an even more comprehensive way than when you do a mitzvah. So when you do a mitzvah, you're grasping onto Hashem through your garments of thought, speech, and action. But when you learn Torah, the analogy is that, or not even in the analogy, the idea is that when you do a mitzvah, the mitzvah kind of wraps around you in a sense. I hope I'm saying this right. We'll verify when we go inside. But when you learn Torah, you wrap around it and it wraps around you at the same time. How do you wrap around it, the mitzvah of learning Torah, in a way that is unlike any Torah, any mitzvah? So let's say you put on tefillin, you're using your action and you engaging with the tefillin and you're putting it on and you're using your garments of action to do that mitzvah. You're connecting to the mitzvah, but the mitzvah is enveloping you in some way. It doesn't become you. You don't ingest it into your very fiber and your being. Whereas when we learn Torah, the concepts of the Torah become one with the matter of our very being. In other words, when a thought enters into your brain, you can't actually distinguish between you and that thought, because that thought's become part of you, part of your consciousness. So Torah learning is regarded as food. You actually ingest it. It becomes one with you. And so that's an even higher level of connecting with Hashem. So that's what we're going to look at. We're going to go inside and look at it right now. Just, it's interesting to note that learning this is a little, I don't know if it's very different or a little different for women than for men, because men have a mitzvah of learning in a different way than women do. As far as I understand, women learn Torah so that they can function in a Torah world. They need to know halacha, they need to know chumash, they need to know tefillah, they need to learn in order to function. But men have a mitzvah of learning Torah just for the sake of learning Torah, even if it has no applicable application, just the fact of sitting and learning the wisdom of Hashem. And I think that that's what the Tanya is going to be addressing itself most primarily, is learning Torah Lishma and the incredible depth of one's connection. So learning Tanya and learning Chassidus is also learning Torah. And we're doing that, and we're certainly doing that to the best of our ability. So I'm not an expert, and I don't know how to quantify how it is different for men and for women. But we don't, as far as I understand, we don't have the mitzvah of learning Torah just for the sake of learning Torah. We're learning Torah so we should feel more connected, be more inspired, whereas Gemara has men sit and learn it just because learning it is the mitzvah. So I don't know where to put that exactly, but I'm just sharing it with you that maybe it's a little different from men and women, but maybe it's not, and I might stand to be corrected. So let's go into chapter 5, and we will read some of these things inside. So it says, so we were talking before, let's just do a little review. So the Alter Rebbe depicted the study of Torah as a royal embrace. When one studies Torah, his intellect embraces and encompasses the divine will and wisdom. And so it's like he's embracing the king. And we spoke a lot about this quote from the Rambam that said, when Hashem created the Torah, he and his knowledge is one. He, the known, the knowledge, the knower, they're all one thing. And Hashem looked into the Torah and created the world. But Hashem and his Torah are one. So when we embrace the king, so to speak, or when we embrace with our mind the Torah, we're embracing the one behind the Torah, the one whose the Torah is the expression of the will of God and how God's will is manifest in the world. So, okay, and then it says that Eliyahu, there's a quote from Eliyahu that no thought can grasp Hashem in any way except grasping Torah, because Torah is the revealed will of God. So now this is what we're going to talk about, how Torah study is superior to all the other mitzvot, because not only is one encompassed by Hashem's will when he studies the Torah, like when he performs a mitzvah, but he embraces Hashem by understanding his wisdom as set forth in the Torah. The way I understand it is that we become one with Hashem's wisdom in a way that isn't replicated in any other action. So, what does it mean to fully elucidate the expression tefisa, to grasp? In the words of Eliyahu, no thought can grasp you. What does that mean? Or only with our intellect and only through Torah study. So how do we grasp Hashem through Torah? So now this is what it's going to explain. When any intellect perceives and understands some intellectual subject, the mind grasps that subject and encompasses it. So just this idea again, when you hear an idea, the idea, you surround that idea. Your brain is involved in that idea. You thinking about that idea. And the subject is grasped and encompassed by and is clothed within the intellect that understood and perceived it. So, in other words, and the commentary here is that when a brain is engaging in an idea, the brain, the thought, the consciousness of the person takes that idea and encompasses that brain, as like a material object is surrounded by the hand that is grasping it. But the subject can said to be within the mind only once the mind has fully understood it. So if you're just learning Torah but you don't really get it, hasn't become one with you, you didn't integrate it, you didn't internalize it, then it hasn't really become one with you. So while the mind is engaged in analyzing the details and the person is sort of grappling with it, then the mind is engaged in analyzing the details, the subject will still be above the mind, and the relationship between them is the reverse. The mind is within the subject and encompassed by. It's kind of gets very technical and a little specific, but basically we're going to say that through learning Torah, through trying to understand the concepts behind Torah and the halachas, we get to connect and bond with Hashem in a deeper way than any other kind of action. And so I think we have to talk about this just for a few moments, because I just spent some time saying that we don't, as women, generally learn Gemara. But what is Gemara and why is it so fundamental? What is the thing about it? So the thing about, I'll just stop the chef for a minute. The thing about Gemara is that, and I've spoken about this before, and it's a very deep idea, and this is probably what's going to make it interesting and comprehensible to us to understand what's going on here in the Tanya. Hashem created the world, so Hashem and the world are one. And Hashem understands which activities and which actions are going to contribute to the illuminating of his presence in the world, and which behaviors and actions are going to lead to the concealment of his light in this world. And every single halacha and every single detail in the Gemara and every single argument between these Amoraim and these Tanoim and these ones and those ones, and this one said this and this one is saying that, they're all trying to connect to that underlining light and truth of godliness being revealed in the world. And so it might seem like it's a insignificant detail. On Shabbat, are you allowed to take your tea bag and put it in a cup and then take out your tea bag from a cup on Shabbos? Are you allowed to do that? I'm not saying that this is what they're discussing in the Gemara. It's just the halacha that came to my mind. Well, when you take a tea bag out of your tea, the tea bag is containing a lot of liquid, and as you pull the tea bag out, the liquid is draining back into the cup, and you're actually then straining. You're not really allowed to do that. The only way you can take your tea bag out of the teacup is to put a spoon, and you take it with liquid, so you don't have that moment when all the tea is draining out into the cup. You have to take a spoon and take your tea bag out so you prevent that draining. So that's the halacha that I'm using to illustrate the point? What's the underlining point? The underlining point is that Shabbos is a day of unity, and we don't separate. We don't strain. We don't use sieves. We don't use strainers. And we don't take tea bags out of cups, because Hashem wants you to understand that the concept of Shabbos is unity and not doing separation and not taking things apart. So you're studying the halacha, and maybe, let's just use this example. Maybe there were lots of rabbis and they spoke about it at great length. Can you make a sukkah on the back of a camel? Can you or can't you? You're traveling through the desert, and are you allowed to make a sukkah on the back of the camel? What the idea is, what's the idea behind the halacha, and is the idea, are you contributing to the light of Hashem being manifested, or are you contributing to the light of Hashem being concealed? So a person who's studying Gemara and studying halacha is not just studying the isolated laws. They're studying because there's an underlining harmony in the world, and every halacha is going to try to keep that harmony flowing in the right way, and every single avera is going to disrupt that harmony and break its rhythm in some way. And so any single thing has to be discussed, and there's minutiae of halacha, because the masters of halacha and the Gemara want to know, is this allowing the flow of divine energy into the world, or is this constricting the flow or diverting the flow? And so it's all connected with God's ultimate wisdom and God's ultimate design for the world to reflect godliness. So there's no little tiny thing. It's all part of that greater reality. And another example, and then we'll go back into the text, is that if you imagine, and I've used this analogy before, of a little train track, and then you have little cars running on the train track. And if the car fits properly on the track, the little train, the car, not a car, but the car on the train, what a carriage or whatever, if it's going smoothly on the train, then it can keep running beautifully on the track. But if that carriage of the train gets off the track, then it's not going to be able to run smoothly. And that track is halacha, keeping us moving smoothly through reality and through the world. And if we're doing something that's not correct, then the little carriage on the track, on the train, is going to not be nicely symmetrically on the track. So it's very important that we know what's the halacha, so we can be flowing in sync with reality. So that's why halacha and Gemara are really manifestations of God's hidden light, and his wisdom and his Torah are one. It's not just isolated, technical things. So let's go back inside. So now, going back inside. So now we're talking about when a person is studying Torah, let's say Gemara, and they're trying to put their intellect to it, and it doesn't say here Gemara actually, so let's say it could be Tanya also, and they're trying to put their intellect to it, then there's going to be a merging of his brain matter and the subject at hand. When, for example, one understands and comprehends a particular halacha in the Mishnah or the Gemara clearly and thoroughly through strenuous application of his mind, his intellect grasps and encompasses that halacha, and his intellect is also enclosed in it at that time when he strives to understand it. So what the Tanya is saying is that there's a double binding going on when we learn Torah. When we do a regular mitzvah, lighting Shabbos candles, let's say, we light the Shabbos candles and we get all the benefit of the mitzvah, but we don't jump into the flame. We don't become one with the candle. We're doing a mitzvah, and that mitzvah is a beautiful thing to do, and it connects us to God. But when we learn Torah, we're doing a mitzvah. That mitzvah connects us to God, but the mitzvah becomes part of us because we using our brain to understand that Torah, and it becomes one with us in a different way. There's a different level of enmeshment and unity, if you can understand. That's really the point of what this is. Now, this halacha, when we're learning halacha, is the wisdom and the will of Hashem, and the rationale underlining halacha is Hashem's wisdom, and the ruling itself is Hashem's will, like before. And so, if it came in Hashem's will, for example, Reuven could claim thus, and Shimon thus, such and such would be the verdict between them. It's saying this situation can come up in the Gemara, and that situation could come up in the Gemara. And even if these things don't have any practical application at all, and there are these arguments and different claims, but all of this is part of Hashem's wisdom and His will, and the way the halacha is going to go this way or that way, or the verdict between a debate around who gets the money, who pays who had which damage, all of this, when a person is studying this and comprehends this, they're going to reach to the will and wisdom of God, which is underneath all of these apparently random or kind of, I don't want to say non-consequential, but detail-specific scenarios. And that's going to be revealing, and learning Torah is revealing this wisdom. And it says, this is a most wonderful unity, this unity of a person's consciousness, a person's brain, and the divine wisdom contained in the Torah. This is a most wonderful unity. And it says actually that there isn't anything else that we can think of when two things can become so enmeshed, one to another. As a person and Torah can be totally enmeshed when a person takes his brain and wraps it around the Torah, and because it's a mitzvah, the Torah is sort of wrapping itself around him. It's in the words of in the Tanya, it says, "V'hu yichud nifla." It's a wondrous unity. She'ein yichud kamuhu. There's no other unity like this. V'lo ke'er ko nimtza klal b'gashmiot. There aren't other things that we can think of that one unifies so totally to a topic as one unifying to the wisdom of God through learning Torah. It's kind of amazing, really. And that they should actually become one and united from every side and angle. And this, says the Tanya, is the distinctive, infinitely great and wonderful superiority of the mitzvah of knowing and comprehending Torah. And this is higher than any other mitzvah involving action, even those mitzvot when we need to use our speech. So, and it says, so it's yeah. So, because all the mitzvahs that one performs in action and in speech, Hashem clothes the soul and envelops it with His light from head to foot, from the highest to the lowest. But in the case of knowledge of Torah, apart from the intellect being clothed by divine wisdom, the divine wisdom enters into the person, not just surrounds him, but enters into it. And now the Torah is going to say that learning Torah in this way, where you use your brain to really understand it and you get connected to the ideas, it's almost like eating. You actually ingest the food and the food becomes part of you. And so, yeah, let's see where it says that. Here. So it says, and it says, this knowledge of Torah, the Torah is absorbed in the soul and intellect of the person, and therefore it's called the bread and the food of the soul. because just as physical bread nourishes the body when it is ingested and absorbed within it, and when it's transformed into the blood and the flesh of the person, then the person and his food becomes part of him. You can't separate. Once it's gone in his mouth and he's chewed it and he's digested, it's one with the person. And that's the same with this Torah knowledge, that you've used your mind and you've applied your mind and you've kind of integrated it and it's become one with you. It's regarded as the bread and the food of the soul. To the point when the Torah is grasped by his mind and joined with him so that they become one, it becomes food for the soul. And then it becomes the inner life for it, from the fountainhead of life, the blessed Ein Sof, who is clothed in his wisdom and Torah, that are in the soul of the student. This is the meaning of the verse, V'zehu shekatuv, v'torah secha b'toch ma'ai. The Torah is part of my inner parts. So let's try and understand what this means, other than all these beautiful words, because all these beautiful words are still words on a page, right? And let's try and make it more real even than it is. If we studying God's wisdom, if we bonding with God's wisdom, I'll stop the share for a minute. If we studying God's wisdom and we start having an appreciation for how the Gemara, let's just use for an example again the Gemara. For those people who studying the Gemara, and I've never studied Gemara myself, and maybe we could say the same thing for Chumash, but let's stick with the Gemara for just a few more moments. If you're studying the Gemara for many years, and you start seeing the pattern of how these debates go, you start internalizing what it is that Hashem wants to be manifest in the world. And how do these halachic debates usually, what patterns emerge? Then you're starting to get an understanding of Hashem's world and Hashem's working, and understanding what it is that Hashem wants. So simply what Hashem wants is that divine light should be represented in the world and manifest in the world, and things that obstruct that should be constricted and should be not allowed to happen. But the more you understand that, it doesn't, so this whole thing of it becomes food for you. You start internalizing that way of being into your own consciousness and your own way of behaving and your own way of relating, and that changes who you are, the same way that healthy food changes who you are. You become the result of what you eat and your habits of life. That becomes who you are. You ingest food and nourishment, or you ingest consciousness, or you ingest ideas, or you ingest a mind, a worldview, and that becomes who you are. Food for thought. Thank you for that, Susan. So in a way, there's a similar thing that happens with learning Chumash. Sometimes the stories in Chumash are complicated, not sometimes, many times, and things don't always happen the way we might have thought that they would, but through studying Chumash and the commentaries, we start appreciating a worldview, and that starts influencing us the way food does. It nourishes us, it informs us and illuminates our consciousness and our behavior. So it becomes food because it literally is feeding us and nourishing us. So, and it is similarly written in Eitz Chaim, chapter Portal 44, chapter 3, that the mitzvot are the garments of the souls in paradise. Okay, so let's look at this. This is a slightly different little point.
Did you say misfits?
No, mitzvot.
Oh,
So let's see what it's going to say here. Because now we're going to talk about the fact that Torah has been nurturing to our very being. It's food for the soul because it's going to influence our consciousness, influence our understanding, influence our behavior. And then it's going to say that learning Torah is actually going to benefit our soul in the world to come. So I started off saying the world to come is not the focus because it's our actions in this world. But still, let's see what it's going to say here. In paradise, Gan Eden, Olam Haba, souls enjoy the radiance of the divine presence. In order that that soul, a finite being, be capable of bearing the infinite radiance, it needs its spiritual garments. It needs to be shielded by spiritual garments. The mitzvot it performs during its life on earth provide the soul with these garments, for as explained above, performing mitzvot envelop the soul in divine light as a garment envelops the body. So it's going to say a very interesting thing. This is only half of what it's going to say, because there's a difference between what mitzvot do for the soul in the world to come and what Torah learning do in the world to come. So I'll tell you, and then we'll go inside. When you go to seminary or university, you come in on a lower level, like in Neve, for example, Susan might remember. There's Mechina,
yeah.
and that's for the girls that come right off, from the kotel, didn't learn a thing about Judaism in their whole life, and suddenly they're wearing their T-shirts and their short denim shorts, and they learning Torah in Neve, Mechina, complete beginner. And then as they move through the program, then there's this level and that level, and then there's the Shalhevet level, and then you climb up in levels in Neve or in university. You don't just go to 12th grade the minute you're old enough to go to school. You start off in pre-K and then kindergarten, etc. When your soul comes into Gan Eden, there's this incredible radiance of divine light. The Tanya is going to explain that your soul is going to be impacted by two realities. In order to be able to handle the light, the more mitzvahs you've done in your life is going to give you some garments that are going to enable you to bear, to handle the infinite radiance of that light. Your mitzvahs will be your clothing, your garments. And then it's going to say a very interesting thing. But your Torah learning is going to give you capacity to handle more light. So the mitzvahs will be your garments, protecting you from overwhelm of that light. And the Torah learning is going to enable you will train your soul to handle more light.
I'm glad I learned twice a week with you.
So, thank you. So it's kind of interesting that there are these two different things. So the mitzvahs envelop the soul as a garment envelops the body. But Torah, on the other hand, is the food of the souls in paradise, which had engaged in Torah study for its own sake during their life. And what's going to happen? The Torah and the mitzvot are going to enable that soul to be able to have a greater capacity for that light. Let's just see. So let me just read that out in the words of Chaim Miller, because he explains it, I see, a little differently than here, or in a way a little easier to understand. Let's just see, because he explained that, I think, better. Yeah. So learning Torah usually means that you study it as a divine command. When you learn Torah for its own sake, what's going to happen? The soul's food refers to its ability to internalize divine light, and its garments refer to its sensitivity to the transcendent divine lights which cannot be internalized. So let's just read it here again. As we have discussed, Torah empowers your soul to absorb the divine and to be absorbed in it. In that sense, Torah is both food and a garment by which the soul is surrounded and absorbed. By learning Torah, by studying Torah and performing mitzvot in this world, your soul becomes equipped to receive divine revelation in the afterlife. It is Torah study in particular that does this most effectively, especially when you say the words of Torah out loud. So this also, let's just talk about this also, because sometimes these concepts can be kind of two-dimensional, and then we want to make them three-dimensional. We all live in this world. We souls in bodies. And we've come here for 120 years. Please God, after 120, we go off back into a realm where our souls exist not in bodies. Just like on Shabbos, if you've shopped, you've gone to Evergreen or wherever you've gone, and you've purchased lots of yummy things for Shabbos, and then you spent your Thursday night or your Friday cooking all kinds of yummy treats for Shabbos. When Shabbos comes, you can only eat the food that you have in your home that you purchased before Shabbos. And if anything needs to be cooked, if you didn't cook it before Shabbos, you can't enjoy that food once Shabbos comes. You have to cook it ahead of time. If you ran out of time, the uncooked food, maybe just put it in the freezer for another Shabbos. That's the same thing as our souls coming into the afterlife. The amount of training, the amount of capacity our soul has to absorb and appreciate the light of the radiance of godly light in the world to come is going to be determined by how many mitzvahs we did in this world. Those mitzvahs are going to kind of give us a protection so that we can be immersed in that light, and the more mitzvahs we do, the more capacity. It's like you go into a tanning salon, and if you're very fair or you don't have sunscreen or whatever, you can only take a little bit of light. But if you put on sunscreen and you've trained your body to receive more light, you can maybe take more light. So by way of analogy, if you've got a lot of mitzvahs and your soul was very busy with mitzvahs, you'll be able to handle quite a large capacity of that divine light, because the mitzvahs are going to be garments that will protect your soul from getting overwhelmed. But in a slight, subtle difference, the Torah that you learned would help you expand your capacity to receive that light. It's subtle, and I remember when I learned it, it seemed like two different things. There's the garments that sort of enable you to be exposed to the light and not overwhelmed by the light, and then there's the Torah that increases your capacity to handle and internalize that light. So that's why cooking before Shabbos is what you need to do to eat on Shabbos. And to the extent that you sensitize your soul to spiritual reality, so will you be more comfortable with spiritual reality. And here, the benefit of Chassidus is very pertinent. And for sure, this is not just men and Gomorrah. This is women such as ourselves learning Tanya or Chassidus right now. The more you learn Torah and expose yourself to spiritual principles, and in Tanya, there's principles of life and death and reward and punishment and good and bad and mitzvahs and garments and all these things that we're talking about, the more your soul is permeated and your consciousness is permeated with all these sort of abstract things, the more your soul, when it comes into the next madrega of life, right, the life after life, the more it's comfortable in all these realms of spiritual things, because you've been living and familiarizing yourself with all these spiritual things already. So when your soul leaves your body, it's comfortable in all that realm of spiritual reality. And I'll end with a beautiful quote. It's one of my most favorite thoughts or ideas regarding death. Not that I'm a death junkie, but which is a funny phrase I heard recently, but anyway. When a tzedekah or a tzaddik leaves the body, it says that it's compared to taking a hair and pulling a hair out of milk. So if you have a cup of milk and there's a hair in that milk, you put your finger in and you pull out the hair, and it's very smooth and it's without a lot of difficulty to take the hair out of milk. When a Rasha leaves the world and the Rasha is in the process of dying, it says that it's like taking cotton out of a thorn bush, because the person who's not enlightened, who hasn't steeped their consciousness in divine truths and mystical truths and truths that are espoused upon in Tanya and such, when they have to leave their body, there's so much attachment and so much resistance that it's like trying to pull cotton out of a thorn bush, because it's not a smooth transition. So when that person who was not connecting to spiritual thoughts and spiritual ideas and spiritual constructs gets to Olam Haba, everything's a total shock. And so their capacity to receive that light is very constricted and very different than a person who's sort of marinated themselves and their consciousness and all these things. So when they move on, they have a much broader capacity to receive more light and more light and more light, because they've already been practicing in their life in this world. And that's why Torah is the bridge, because the whole point is that in the world to come, which we're saying is not our focus, but in the world to come, it's all God's consciousness. That's why when we study Torah and we get connected to God's consciousness, we immersing our consciousness in his consciousness. So it makes a lot of sense that when we get to the next world, we are already familiar in living in that realm of Hashem's consciousness, because we've been doing it all the time. The more we learn Torah, the more we are surrounding our brain is grasping the Torah, and it's permeating and becoming part of us, and the mitzvah of it is wrapping around us, so to speak. So it's wrapping around us and we're wrapping around it.
Wow.
To 5.
I say wow because it all sounds so true, so relatable, so kind of fits in with after living a firm life for 40, I don't know, 2-3 years. It was so like intimidating decades ago. It just feels right now. I think you explained it well, that there's a lot of repetition in the writing and in your words to really grasp it, to really grasp this fundamental idea. Powerful.
Well, thank you for listening. Thank you for putting your brain to grasping it, and these ideas become part of you, and you and Dina Bracha, if you weren't there, I couldn't teach it. So,
I
and
want to
my
meet her.
brain wraps around it more. So
Uh,
it's, thank you.
Dina Bracha, come to Rockland. Matter of fact, you're welcome to my home anytime for Shabbos. I love to meet you
Right.
one day.
Dina Bracha has a husband and a farm in Maine where she works very hard harvesting and planting
Wow.
and
Wow, wow.
doing a lot of things out there.
Amazing. Didn't
Yeah.
Talia Sailor have a life like that at one time? I don't know, somehow.
Maybe, I don't know. But Dina
Well, I
Bracha
hope
and
I'll
her
meet you one
husband
day.
do everything by hand. They kind of off the grid. It's very impressive.
Wow,
Yeah.
cool.
All right. So, Lila
Do
Tov.
they have anybody interested in shidduchim? Because I know a neighbor who wants to marry a guy who's off the grid and on a farm. Seriously, I'm not joking.
Oh, okay. So you have a girl who wants to marry a guy who's off the grid and
Yeah.
oh, all right. We might even have someone in mind. How old is she?
Maybe 21, 22.
Oh, 21 or 22. Okay, well,
And
we'll keep it in
Litvish
mind.
by upbringing.
And Litvish by upbringing. Okay,
That
you never
narrows
know.
it down a little. Use the
Never know.
brain.
All right, so let me
Okay.
pause the
Thank